Hello everyone, Alpha Sentry here as always. Welcome back to another Duelyst deck tech. And before we get started here, I just want to point out the fact that I have fixed this light that's been ominously hovering above my head, and I'm no longer being abducted by aliens. Moved it slightly over there, so now you guys can actually see top of my head, which you can all be very thankful of. You get to bask in my lovely hair. Alright, so let's have a look at this deck here. This is I like to call it a Hyper Lurking Fear Maehv deck. We'll get to why it's hyper in a minute, but obviously it's a Lurking Fear Dying Wish deck. So the main cards here are going to be the 3 Carrion Collector and the 3 Lurking Fear. The idea being, of course, both of these are going to discount your Dying Wish minions and make them all 1 mana cheaper. I think what was intended was Carrion Collector would replace Lurking Fear when there was the rotation. Obviously now the rotation counterplay have gone back on that idea. So we get all the cards, and that means we can actually run 6 Lurking Fear in our constructed deck. I'm just going to call Carrion Collectors Lurking Fear as well, because they're basically the same thing. So we get to run 6 copies of Lurking Fear, which leads to this absolutely nuts game plan. It makes the deck a whole lot more consistent, because now instead of having 3 and you probably won't get one early, 50-50 chance to get one turn 1, now we get to run 6 copies, and getting a turn 1 Lurking Fear is now just as probable as getting a 2-drop if you're playing one of Death's Advocate's list with 6 2-drops. So yeah, a lot more consistent, the deck. If you don't get a Lurking Fear on turn 1, you can chalk it up to bad luck, but the deck still does fine without it. Yeah, the consistency is one thing that makes this deck a lot better these days. The other thing, of course, is you can run 6, so you can stack. You can often play 3 Lurking Fears in a single game, which is going to discount every Dying Wish minion by 3, which is absolutely nuts. So that's going to lead to the next deck building point that I want to point out. Every single minion we're running has Dying Wish. So every Lurking Fear you play discounts your whole deck by 1. So once you've played 3, once you've played even 4, happens some games, like basically every minion in your deck will cost 0. So that's what we're going for here. We just want to decrease the cost of our stuff, bring this curve that looks a little mid-rangey, lots of 4s, a few 3s, the 5. We want to bring that right down, so, now we're playing 2 mana Duelyst, 3 mana Reaper of the Nine Moons, 2 mana Reaper of the Nine Moons, 0 mana Cell Soul, things like this. So just playing a bunch of minions. And yeah, that leads to the next point here. Of course, we're running 3 Rite of the Undervault, which is definitely something that you're not used to seeing in a Maehv at all. The card's been gone for quite a while, but I think this deck really makes it shine. And I honestly think this is the best way to build Maehv right now. So you'll see many other Maehv Dying Wish decks. They ramp into things like Vorpal Reaver, they ramp into Dagona, they ramp into Grimes, they ramp into these big, heavy threats that, so maybe you've played 1 or 2 discounts, your 6 mana turn looks like Duelyst plus Vorpal Reaver. Decent, but then they just Blood of Air the Vorpal Reaver, clear the Duelyst, you're not too far ahead, and there's not that much card draw on the deck as well. It's something you have to balance. With this deck, your 6 mana turn is going to look like, 0 mana Carrion Collector, 0 mana Nightmare Operant, 0 mana Cell Soul into Rite of the Undervault, and then play 0 mana Void Hunter, 0 mana Azure Horn, and just dump a whole bunch of cards. So it really makes you immune to this big minion removal, which is rampy Dying Wish decks would typically fall a little bit to. And especially with Vet as always prevalent in the meta, that style typically struggles a little bit, but we get around that just by dumping out a whole bunch of cards and refilling with a whole bunch of draw. Of course, the other main player here, as with any Maehv deck, is going to be Azure Horn Shaman. It gets discounted, obviously, but with your Bloodborne spell, you play Azure Horn Shaman, and you Bloodborne spell it, and all of this board that you've played for 0 or 1 mana, all of these Necromarters, all of these Void Hunters, all of these Nightmare Operants that are typically weak minions, suddenly get like 6 health, which is absolutely huge. So you can build these absolutely massive boards. using Azerhorn Shaman. And as with most Maehv decks, the way you're going to capitalize on having a board is with Fura Chakram. Card's absolutely insane. If you don't play around it, you're going to get completely blown the fuck out. The other key point that we'll talk about here is that we're not running any removal except for Demonic Lure. So there's arguments for using Ritual Banishing, arguments for a handful of other removal cards, but the fact is they don't get discounted by Lurking Fear, and we really want to be playing the proactive game plan. Whip is good, and you should definitely try and save Whip for the bigger targets, but for the main part, we're just going to be ignoring our opponent's plan and pushing our own game plan of swarming the board with 4/6, 4/8 minions, and then refilling our hand. We typically want to be ahead on board, and that makes the, if we're ahead on board, they play a scary minion, we play a whole bunch of 4/8s. Suddenly their scary minion looks a little bit paler in comparison. So that's my thought process for why we only want to run Demonic Lure as removal. I guess now we shall get into the minion choices a little bit. So Azerhorn Shaman, Carrion Collector, of course, no-brainers. Nightmare Operant, I felt like I wanted another set of 2-drops, not because you don't have enough 2-drops. If you count the actual Lurking Fear as a 2-drop as well, then you have the 9 that you typically want, just because I want to guarantee that with 2 Lurking Fears played, I'll be able to have 0 mana minions to combo with Azerhorn Shaman and to combo with Rite of the Undervault. Yeah, I basically just wanted to lower the curve. The other option was Jaxi, but that Jaxi works a lot worse with Azerhorn Shaman, so that's why we've gone with Nightmare Operant. And sometimes you'll get a Mechazor, very fringe benefit, but it is there. The 3 drops are going for a 3 Cellsoul and 3 Void Hunter. Cellsoul is just good when we want a high tempo play, high impact, This is what we want to be playing turn 2. We want to go turn 1 Lurking Fear, turn 2 Cellsoul Duelyst, something like that. Just really put stats onto the board quickly, which is going to allow us to get back into the game after playing a Lurking Fear on turn 1. So 3 Cellsoul is a little scary to be running, and I'll never play 3 in a game. I typically won't play 2 in a game. You want to be very cautious, unless you're going to something like, if you can buff it with Azerhorn Shaman, then it's typically safe, because it's really hard to deal the 9 points of damage to kill a buffed Cellsoul. And Void Hunter is for when you want a 3-drop that won't kill you. Yeah, I will often replace the 2nd or 3rd copies of Cellsoul, and Void Hunter is just a solid 3-drop. When you're playing them for 2 mana, 1 mana, it really doesn't matter. You're not losing any tempo at all, and it keeps your hand full. And of course, with Azerhorn Shaman, it's 4/6. That's big. Duelyst is our, huge, high-impact 4-drop we want to be running. So you want to play these out early to make sure you go even on board. Yeah, make sure you don't get tempoed out. And Necromata is basically the second... Well, Desolator as well. Basically, the backup draw options. So you don't have to cast Rite on 6 every game. Typically, you want to make your hand last a little bit longer and play Rite on 7 or 8, and both of these 4-drops are excellent at doing that. Worth noting with Desolator, if you play it and then it comes back in your hand, it doesn't get discounted by the past Lurking Fears, so I will typically just play it for the cheap and then replace it once it's back in my hand. Of course, there are some games where you just need to keep playing Desolators. And Necromata, I will occasionally play Neko BBS when it's discounted to 2 mana or so just to refill my hand. It's not optimal, but definitely something you can do to keep the minions coming. And 3 Reaper of the Nine Moons. Biggest threat in the deck, and initially I was running without them, but I think they are just too strong. Once they're down to 2 or 3, it's not like you're spending most of your turn even playing this. It's the threat of just playing Reaper of the Nine Moons and then following it up with Fura Chakram. If you play it in their face and they kill it, then you still get their minion to Chakram. If you play it in the back and they don't kill it, then you can fly in and frenzy them for 7, which will just win games by itself. I definitely felt like it needed a slightly stronger top end, and this is a really, really strong choice. Alright, so let's finish up this part here. I've been talking for a while, and let's go, and I'm actually going to rewatch some of my past games to show you guys how the deck works, and you can see my win rate with the deck as well. I think, taking a page out of Ree's book here, I think it is slightly better to go back and watch replays, just because I'll have more time to explain my thought process instead of just spending half of my time thinking. I think you guys will all get more out from watching replays. So I'll see you in game.